All right, so we are going to start our World War I unit. And with our World War I unit, each of you should have received a packet. This packet is going to be your notes packet. You'll need to bring this every day for the activities and lessons that we are going to have. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by looking at the first question on the front page. You should have something to write with, and you should also have two different colored, either colored pencils or crayons. So make sure you have those things. With these notes, they will be at a faster pace. And what you will have to do is you will have to listen to the information and record what you think is important to your understanding. There will be certain things that I will tell you you need to write down, and then the other things you should listen and jot down. If you need to pause the notes, then you can do so that you can get caught up. If you need to replay a certain portion of the notes, then you can do that. But we are just looking at the first question, which is what are the four main causes of World War I? And now this is looking at the source of why World War I started. And it's easy to remember because I always say the four main causes because MAIN is an acronym for those four causes, which stands for militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. So on your chart, we're going to start in the top left-hand corner box, and I want you to write the term militarism that you see on the screen. And we're going to define militarism as the fact that many nations were building up their militaries to protect themselves from or attack other nations for territory. To protect themselves from or attack other nations for territory. So basically during this time, Europe was kind of in what you would call an arms race. They were trying to gather as many, large weapons and militaries and build, new technologies that would help them in growing their militaries. Two of the main ones were Great Britain, which had a very large navy, and Germany, that also wanted to build this great grand navy. Germany and France were competing to build large armies, and a lot of these nations were starting the practice of what they call universal conscription, which is basically another name for the draft, as we refer to it in our country. And they were more or less just drafting everyone into their militaries to make them more powerful. And this included even in times of peace when they weren't fighting, they were still drafting people into their militaries. And like I said, there was a variety of reasons for doing this. Some, it was more so to kind of intimidate other nations or prepare themselves to be ready to go in and potentially take over other territories. For others, it was more on the protection side to protect themselves from a potential takeover. But many of these powers during this time were doubling their military in size. And a lot of times it resulted in, higher taxes for the people and all kinds of other expenses. But militarism was one of the four causes. The second is alliances. And so you want to write this in another box. And for the alliances, for about 20 years prior to World War I, many of the nations of Europe were beginning to make alliances are joined together for some type of common goal. Initially, many of them thought it was going to be to more or less just promote peace, and kind of have each other's back in case any war or anything broke out. But as these alliances started to grow, it kind of caused more conflict over different issues. And that was something that really kind of brewed tensions between the two sides. And there were two main alliances. There was what we call the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. On your paper at the bottom, you'll see there's two boxes on the right side. The first one says Triple Alliance. And if you look on the screen, the members of the Triple Alliance were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So in that box, I would write those three countries. And then the Triple Entente included the three countries of Great Britain, France, and Russia. So I would write those three countries in there. And then you also have your map there, which you can label and color accordingly. And I would suggest doing that now, selecting one colored pencil or crayon and shading in the Triple Alliance and coloring in which color that is on the side there. So like if you're using on the map there, they use the green. So I would shade where it says Triple Alliance on the right with my green colored pencil, and then I'd shade that in and label those, and then do the same thing for the Triple Entente with my other color. So I might pause now and complete that task. All right, the next cause is imperialism, which you should have familiarity with because we've already discussed this term. So imperialism is the idea that many of the European nations during this time were in the process of gathering colonies and building their empires. And this included, around the world, specifically in Africa and Asia, which we already know. But though many of those countries that were doing that were countries in the Triple Entente, like Great Britain and France. But countries like Germany and Italy, they also wanted to be building a colonial empire and were kind of almost jealous of these growing empires that Britain and France had. So it started to kind of become a competition between them, and this caused many conflicts and confrontations over territory between Great Britain and France, and then Germany and Austria-Hungary and Italy and these other places. So the imperialism of the time really kind of added to the tensions between the sides. So, and as you know, the United States, we were also at the same time period starting to become an imperialist nation and adding territory. So we were just as kind of guilty during this time period. So imperialism is a third cause. And finally, the fourth cause is what we call nationalism. Nationalism. And nationalism is the idea that the people of these nations had great pride in their countries, in their homelands. And they a lot of times had this belief that their own nation or culture was superior to all others around. And what this did is it kind of added to that militarism, that idea that, their nation needed to build up and take over other nations. It also, though, added to many groups that wanted their own independence. In the next question, you're going to be looking at the catalyst or the initial cause that sparked World War I. And that really has to do with this nationalism term, because there were a group of individuals that were, basically part of the Balkans, which is a territory not too far from Austria-Hungary, and was actually part of Austria-Hungary. And this included Serbia, Czechoslovakia, Bosnia, and these individual groups were all ruled as one country, and they wanted independence for their separate nationalities and wanted to kind of rebel against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And it was one of the things that sparked the initial start of World War I. So now what you're going to do is you are going to get a green paper and start looking at question number 2, which is, what event was the catalyst for the start of World War I? And you are going to fill in the who, when, where, what, how, and why about that event. So go ahead and do that now.